There's lots of them around.
There's a bunch.
Mike Roers, nice
Hi,
to meet
Mike.
you.
Pleasure to meet
That's
you.
my wife, Brittany,
Commissioner,
coming,
good to
I
see
guess.
you. Hi, Brittany. Thank you guys for opening up your place today.
Yeah, welcome.
We really appreciate it. We were talking about with drought, it's sometimes they know it didn't rain, but they don't understand the implications of what that means, especially on the livestock.
Yeah. A lot of chances of rain, but nothing ever seems to fall. So.
Have you ever seen it like this?
I have not.
Yeah.
I have not. No, I have never seen it this dry.
Thanks for having us at your place. How many kitties are around here?
Like 28.
Maybe the governor wants to take one with him.
Yeah. That means you haven't had a vacation since 2004. So that's the way it works.
Don't tell my wife that we have robotics. Yeah. We got robotics.
You've seen it change a lot.
I have, correct. Yep, for sure. So.
Pile in.
Oh yeah. In the back.
Oh, I've ridden in the back of a truck many times.
Oh yeah.
Okay, right. Okay.
And once you reach that drought status, then it eliminates the option of haying and grazing. That's Douglas, Pope,
But she has lived in
That's
Johnstown.
Douglas?
She graduated.
Douglas is the northwest corner.
Okay, that one with the most red.
Yeah, and not one to be a lot of cliches, but this is not like a silver bullet situation. It's a silver buckshot situation. So we're gonna do like we did hours of service. We did a 0 interest loan with a no payback for a year for farmers. Not that farmers need another loan, but it's helpful for banks that want to help manage some cash flow for farmers that are buying forage right now, and that's a helpful thing. Then the state owns a lot of land too through the DNR or MnDOT, so opening up some of those lands for grazing and haying helps put more forage on the market. And then also we have a state drought resource webpage right on our Department of Ag website that has a lot of these resources and pieces there. So it's kind of like an all of the above type of situation. Crop insurance to me doesn't make farmers whole. It'll help you get to the next year. It'll help is a true safety net in that situation. But for livestock farmers, as we were just saying, there really isn't a good insurance option. There's payments and different things that kick in, but it's not equivalent to crop insurance. So it forces a lot of tough decisions. So yeah, that's a tough one. And I think that's why we're looking at all the options to see if there's things that we can do. We've been looking at too, like if you're going to use like state land, you got to fence and you got to water and you got to do all these other different things. Is there assistance we could do with that? And then, it just, there's, so many different things going on. A lot of people are starting to chop, corn, and then you got to look at the toxicity of that.
In the event you get a rain where you have a lot of quick growth, then it uptakes that nitrogen. So if you would harvest that shortly after the initial rain, that's when the nitrate
has a high nitrate level.
Hi, Joe Wagner.
Nice to meet you.
Good. Joe's like 2 miles from your cattle farms. And
Keith England, Commissioner.
Nice to see you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for being on.
Well, we run about between 4,000 and 5,000 beef cows in 3 different states, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota. And family operation, my wife Hope and brother Eric, and we're all in it together.
Let's talk about how the impacts of this year. So obviously, 4,000, 5,000 livestock, they all need to eat, and so getting them fed and keeping them fed, how difficult has that been?
I thought you were on the other. Well, you bring up a good. It's a good question. You bring up a good point, Joel. We're on the verge of quite a serious situation here. As dry as it's been, we've logged about 1.5 inches of rain since the 8th of April. In about 4 different events, so it's very dry. The crops are as poor as I've seen them in my farming career.
What can happen legislatively? What can happen statewide? What would we need to hear? What would, other than rain?
Yeah, I mean, Mother Nature would ultimately do the most good for us with some timely rains, and it's to the point now where this year it may not do us a lot of good even for this year. However, it would build subsoil moisture for next year, because that's a concern too. But to answer your question, I would say, there's some talk about opening up CRP ground for emergency haying and grazing. As soon as we could do that, would help the forage supply. We're just trying to build forage supplies, because no matter, even if you take cost into consideration, even if you wanted to buy a bale of hay, I don't know for sure where you'd find it. So just generating as many feed resources as possible, and CRP would be one option.
Because we were saying that they're not being disrespectful, but for a lot of folks, when it's sunny and dry, that means they can boat and golf, and they just worry about their yard, and that's the only thing. Our point is trying to tell them the cascade of effects that this happens, both from the individual folks, the producers, but also at the grocery store. And that Ag Committee in Congress making the case that crop insurance was the best thing for all of us. This was not a safety net for producers, it was a safety net for the food supply. That Ag Committee did a lot of things where, again, this was why I know it seemed at the time there was this movement, well, let's strip out the nutrition programs out of the food. When you separate the people who eat the food from the people who make it, you run into big problems trying to get things done. That's that argument.
Oh, absolutely.
Trying to keep
challenge and everything's been, the growing patterns have just been skewed from, past years. So
Those edible beans and stuff like that, so that they really appreciate keeping those permits.
My biggest concern is that we make sure we have things in place if, and these things tend to do this way if we have multiple year of drought. And I think Ron's point being is we're going to have to start thinking if we're seeing consistent change in patterns. Again, I am incredibly thankful for the research that has all been done. University of Minnesota is a part of that, all your checkoff programs and things. Thank God we have seed that's more drought resistant. Thank God we have some of those things. We're going to have to think about what that looks like in the future, how some of that management on the land looks like if this is more typical than atypical. If this, if we don't have this again for another 33 years, that's one thing, but if you have multiple years of it.
Apparently it's a county by county decision, but what I was told anyways for our county is that when the drought status reaches a certain level, when the LFP kicks in, then the eligibility or option of haying or grazing CRP is eliminated. Well, like I made the comment, we're looking for forage, not necessarily a check.
If you put everybody, all the stakeholders in a room, turned off the lights, made them write down a list, I bet those lists would be very similar, what everybody wants. Yeah. But when it's all light out and everybody can see, everybody has to keep their ground, nothing gets done. But this is an opportunity for that. Agree. Like you're saying, the synergies of Minnesota, we're in a great state, a lot of synergies. So we are facing a drought. But some of the positive things that we have is our ethanol industry, our beet industry, our cannery industry that we can focus on and help get through.
That's right.
And like you've already identified with some of the hours of service, that would be great, but expand it to all forage, all winter, because what's going to happen is instead of feeding just hay, which comes from the local area, producers are going to have to feed something a little bit rougher, like corn stalks, for example, but they can fix that ration with distillers, especially in Minnesota. So, those are things that would really help.
Yeah.
That's a good life. I was telling Mike, my claim to fame is that I graduated.
The augers up top drop feed down. The augers up top drop feed down. Kind of like the game. They like to get that. Yeah. Dump on monthly sheet. Yeah, I think sees a lot of that.
Too much noise.
Wherever they want, and they kind of wait. They kind of wait to get into the milkers. So. Nope, that sounds real good. Yep, correct.
For the purpose we're out here, I'm out here with Commissioner Peterson. We're out here with folks representing the cattlemen, the turkey growers. We've got dairy folks out here. Representative Backer here. This issue of the drought that we're experiencing and the stresses that are being put on our producers. We want to make sure we're out here, first of all, hearing what they're asking or what they're experiencing, and then making sure some of the solutions that are coming from folks that know this business are coming up both to a state level and then at the federal level. I'm really proud of the work bipartisanly that has been done around agriculture, some really smart things, and I continue, Representative Backer, to congratulate the legislature on some of our emergency contingency funds where we don't reach a FEMA level emergency, but we have help. We saw it in dairy farms back in the winter of 2019. We saw a lot of folks down in southeast Minnesota, their farms collapsed because of the heavy snow. That was there to help. So we're here to see what's happening, to look at these crops and to watch the differences. And I think for the viewers around this area who are involved in agriculture, they get it, that there's row cropping, there's turkey producers, there's cattlemen, milk producers, all have their different challenges from the input costs and things that are out there, and the drought exacerbates that. We want to just make sure, and we did this yesterday, we did an executive order around some of the regulations on trucking requirements and hours of service, because what we're asking now is folks are driving long distances to find the forage necessary for their livestock. We want to make sure that we're not adding added pressures to that. There are some federal programs that support livestock safety net, but I think candidly we've all talked about it's not as robust as it is with like crop insurance and other things. And for folks out there not directly involved in agriculture, the reason this matters is the United States has the most abundant, affordable, safest food supply of any place on the planet. We're all in that together. So when we're talking about these safety net programs like crop insurance, every single one of us benefits from those. Every single one of us benefits at the grocery store. Every single one of us benefits with having the diversity on the land so that producers can stay out here, they can continue to innovate. So the drought has intensified since we last spoke a week ago. We've now, and Commissioner Peterson will talk about some of the specifics, we have a big swath of the state in D3 extreme drought conditions, and that will have an impact going forward. We are seeing though, and again, the folks here who remind me of this, Mike reminded me of it, Kevin Papp from Farm Bureau always reminds me of this one too, is you need to be careful about it of saying where areas are in this, because you might have a farm 1 mile away from another that got that 0.6 of rain and made a difference. And you've got families living next to each other where some are really hurting from it and others, by luck of the draw, got through it. So I think when we talk about this, don't lump everything together, but make sure that there are different tools and flexibility for folks who need it. That may mean some grazing on public lands. It may deal with some of the ditch mowings and those types of things. That's what we're out here to hear from. So I'm really grateful to the Roer family, really grateful for all the producers who took a little time out of their day to day. And then I think, again, telling the story to all Minnesotans, agriculture, we're a top 5 agricultural state. We don't just, these folks don't feed Minnesota or the United States, they feed the world. And they have innovated with new ways of creating markets here at home. We need to make sure that that continues. So, and again, I see with the Roer family, sometimes you ask families what they raise on their farm, and it looks to me like they're raising 5 little girls too on this farm. And these are family farms. These are places that for many of us, we came from communities where this was the backbone of what we did. It also shapes how we see things. And I'm just grateful to have a chance to be out here and work with Representative Backer and Commissioner Peterson to take what we learned here to make some differences.
Well, us in greater Minnesota, one of the things I want to share is the food that you see on your table in the suburban area and the metro area throughout the state is good folks like we saw here today with Mike, Brittany and his family, and others here. So it is very important. One of the things that the governor also said and the commissioner is not every area is the same. On the way up this morning, I was talking to farm producers, obviously ag producers, and one of the conversations that one of the farmers wanted to let the commissioner and the governor know is that, hey, not every area is the same. So a one slot type of area just doesn't do it, because we feed the world. What works in Stevens County doesn't work in Traverse County because we have differences. And as I shared with the governor and the commissioner, it's good that irrigation is still going, because we do need that feed for our livestock, for dairy, so we can feed our families and feed the world. So I really appreciate it, what everybody is doing. Minnesotans have a great tradition of working together, and we're seeing that today. This is not a Democrat or Republican issue. This is a Minnesotan issue, and I'm glad for that, and we will continue to work together. Thank you.
In Minnesota, we have a lot of headwinds today with all the weather that's being challenged, but one of the things that's really positive when things get tough, like they are with the environment and the weather today, one of the things like we can be very thankful for is how Governor is bringing out together his agencies in order to alleviate some of the problems, like we've heard of, some of the hours of service, some of the opening the grazing, pushing back against the federal regulations on some of the CRP. That's one of the neat things about Minnesota. When things get tough and hard to go, we come together and we become stronger and come out of it better in the end. And I really appreciate everything that's been happening here and everything that we're going to continue to do in the future. So thanks for everything, Governor.
Thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Yep, and again, a lot of the aid does come from the federal government for drought or disaster, keep in mind we have crop insurance, which come from the government, the federal government. I would say too, the other issue though is that livestock doesn't have the same protection that crops do through insurance. And crop insurance doesn't make farmers whole. It'll help them get to the next year. It's a safety net. And so there are many programs that are designed. Many of them will have to be funded, though, too, through the federal government. And then the state does have, as the governor said, some programs that can help around the edges. And so whether we have zero interest loans for farmers that are through the state. We also have things that we can do, whether it's opening up state-owned lands for grazing or haying. So there's kind of a mix, and we are working very closely with our federal partners on this. It's something we've seen with the Conservation Reserve Program, which is very important to the state. Minnesota, over 1 million acres in CRP in the state, that there's ways that we could maybe access that more in drought years. And so Senator Smith, I think, introduced a bill yesterday to kind of help move that along in future years. It's not going to help us this year, but and CRP is very important. And the birds and all the wildlife, everything that comes with it, saving marginal land. But in drought years, I think that we have to be more responsive to our producers, and that's where I think you're going to see Congress, as whether it's in the next Farm Bill or in addition, kind of tweak some of those programs.
We'll continue to work with the governor per se, and just like the governor and I were talking here briefly, because we see a lot of impact on the producers. But I represent 42 communities, and those communities, those main streets, are also impacted. So, and with the largest landowner in the state of Minnesota being the federal and the state government, we got to keep those things. And there's things that we can do on the state level, if it's ditch mowing, if it's expanding ditch mowing, if it's in some of the other land that's owned and operated and looked at DNR. And we're starting to see that. We heard that just earlier here today. So what we could do on the state, we're supposed to be coming back in September together. So if there's something we can do, maybe. Well, I think you have a decision. I think you have an impact on that, Governor. So if we come back, or when we do come back, if we have a special session, some of this stuff can, if we need to, we can gap that, because a lot of families are impacted, not just in 12A, but across the state and businesses.
That's exactly right.
A special session is on.
Yeah, it is. We've got some good stuff, really good. And again, I will highlight this. As the only divided legislature in the country, I'm incredibly proud that we have a budget that works. It's a budget that was bipartisan, and there was a good piece of that understanding that COVID hit folks and hit businesses disproportionately, and we need to come back and decide what to do with that $250 million that we collectively decided together on those frontline workers. And I was just mentioning to Representative Backer, very good fiscal management has Minnesota in as solid a shape as any state in the country. We still have about $1.3 billion of the federal relief dollars that were meant to be relief. And I think we can start thinking about that, of the abilities, not all of it, some of it has parameters around it, but if there's things that we can do that impact it from this, that we can help. So I think we'll be in September. I think we'll come back and get our work done together. And again, that may be right because of being in the drought. If there's some things we can pick up in that session, I'm certainly open to that.
Got time for just one or two
Sure.
more?
Oh, okay,
Maybe.
so something.
Yeah.
Here and here.
Okay, so I was talking to Senator Smith this morning about the CRP, and we chatted a little bit about that. There's what you've proposed here and what you have going on here. But how about today? You're here on the site. You're in the field. You're in what is something that maybe that you outside of that you learned today, or that you can take back to St. Paul?
Yeah, and I'm really glad to hear this. I think one of the things we've learned, and the COVID pandemic forced all of us to learn new ways of doing business. That is true in state government, where we were working across 24 state agencies, where we were in the room together. And I think a lot of that, most folks would say, well, that's the way things should work. In the larger organizations, you get very siloed up. I think one of the things we're going to take back, and I'm celebrating to hear it from producers out here who are saying, we are seeing a little bit of that. We are seeing the DNR commissioner sitting down with the commissioner of transportation, with the commissioner of agriculture, and in a bipartisan manner saying, are there some things we can do here? These don't have to be false choices. And Representative Backer mentioned it, and I will echo this. I've said this from my time growing up around family in agriculture to being on the House Ag Committee. These are folks that care deeply about stewardship of the land and about passing on to family and getting that right. And so when we talk about CRP, which I am a huge fan of, our RIM programs and all that, I also am a realist at times when we need to move some of that and to be able to help. And I think coming out of this, to hear that producers out here are starting to feel that there's a little bit of breaking down of those silos, there's a little bit of collaboration together, and there's a little bit of less rigidness on this. And I think Commissioner Peterson's work with those other groups, with the Nature Conservancy, with Pheasants Forever and some of those, they get it too. This is neighbor helping neighbor at a time of crisis, and we can manage that right. So I think, again, I'm always trying to find a win-win where it isn't pitting one against the other. And I have said this and will continue to say it, the ability to produce, feed, fuel, and clothe the world doesn't have to be in conflict with sustainable environmental practices. They can go hand in hand. And I think coming out of this drought, it's going to do that. And then again, the question that got asked earlier is a very good one. How will we think about this differently? Are there different practices that need to be done? Are there different ways? And the research around drought-resistant crops and things has to continue forward, because I think unfortunately, but it's just the reality, this will probably become more common than an outlier, and we should prepare for it.
Should farmers start having electric tractors instead of like diesel operated tractors?
That will be their choice. As I told people, as we jumped in a really nice Chevy gas-powered vehicle, you'll still be able to buy that vehicle whenever you want. I think the issue here is innovation and change is always a little bit hard, and I think those things are coming. These folks have adapted. They've adapted and seen whether we see self-driving tractors or those types of things. I would anticipate some of that is, and I just witnessed it going from watching folks milk by hand to watch a robot in there bring cattle in and milk it themselves. That was a big innovation. I'm probably were people complaining about that when we moved from hand, well, no, not people who actually had to hand milk. They were happy about it, but others might have thought they didn't need that. So I would tell people on this that some of these things can get a little bit lifted up. I'm pretty agnostic to where you're at, and I don't like to do the climate change things to start a fight. It's just the reality of it that it is hotter now. It is smoky today as we see some of these things. And it is not a value judgment or an ideology. We should just adapt to it. And I am a firm believer that there are things that you can do through policy, but I'm also a capitalist and a firm believer that the market will dictate some of those things. We just have to find that sweet spot. So I would tell them, if it saves you money, it is more efficient, it is more effective, it reduces carbon, and it's the right choice for your family, you should have the choice to buy one. You'll also have the choice to not buy one if you don't want to. So I think that's what's coming. But we're glad you're all out here today. Again, thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Yep.
So, can I get your name?